All right, let's talk about the Los Angeles Chargers. For anyone who, of course, is not aware, the Chargers recently made a massive trade, and of course, they got rave reviews pretty much across the board. Really good job by Ortiz and the staff. But when you dive deeper into the numbers and really analyze this trade, guys, it's even smarter than you think. What a masterclass move by the Chargers. We'll get into all those details in just 1 second. But first, I'm Nick. That is Andrew, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, the Chargers set a lot of headlines a buzzing Tuesday evening when they made a big trade to upgrade their defense. Let's refresh everyone with the details of this particular trade. Let's pull up the tweet first reported via Ian Rappaport, obviously a famous reporter, one of the best in the business. He posted on X the full trade. The Ravens get safety Alohi Gilman and a 2026 fifth rounder, and the Chargers get Oweh and a future seventh round selection. So basically, it's Gilman for Oweh, and the Ravens get a fifth rounder. The seventh rounder is obviously there's some value there, but the key element there is the fifth round pick. Oweh comes into this pass rush room to help out this Chargers defense that frankly needs some help. In fact, let's go to our next post on X. I want to highlight Chris Rim for highlighting this. I think it's a really important insight. He posted Alohi Gilman to Baltimore for Odafe Oweh. Again, that's basically the trade plus a fifth round sweetener for the Baltimore Ravens. Chris comments, Oweh, a first round pick in 2021, is 33rd in the NFL in pressure rate at 11%, according to True Media. Second on the Chargers to Tuipulotu, which is 12th in the NFL. The next higher pressure rate among LA edge rushers, Caleb Murphy, who ranks 131st. So obviously, this is a position of need for the Chargers. They need some help. They need some reinforcements. They need more pass rushers. We saw their front four really not put together a really good showing against the Washington Commanders. The Commanders, especially after falling behind 10-0, really kind of had their way with the Chargers front. They needed some help. Always a veteran guy who's been around the block, comes from a good organization, of course, the Baltimore Ravens. Ortiz knows them extremely well. So this is a really good move for all those reasons. But when you take a step back and look at the data and really understand what's going on here, this was just a masterclass move. I think one of the better steals I've seen this entire season, even going back to the preseason and prior to that. This was a great job by Joe Ortiz. And let me explain why. So when it comes to anytime you're trading and adding draft picks for sweeteners, you have to understand what a draft pick really represents, right? Because everyone looks at it, well, what is a first round pick? What is a second round pick? And there's all these value charts and everything like that. And that's important to understand, just from a numeric perspective, but from just what it means from a concept, a draft pick is just a percentage chance to get a good solid player, right? No one really knows if anyone's going to be a Hall of Fame player or not. You just view a draft pick as, hey, what's the odds we pick a guy and he's a good player for us? So a first round pick generally has like a 50% hit rate. A second round pick has, a third, 1 in 3, 33%. In fact, Miles, if you don't mind, let's go ahead and pull up the chart here, kind of highlighting this in graphical form, talking about a solid player hit rate in the draft, right? A first round pick, there you can see 0.5, 50%. Second round, a little more than 0.3, 1/3. Third rounder, about a quarter, 1 in every 4. Fourth rounder, 0.1. Fifth rounder, sixth round, seventh rounder. And you can see, right, we got the decay there as your odds of getting a solid player drop dramatically as you get deeper into the draft, right? Which makes sense. We'll understand that. But this is how teams kind of view it, right? A first round pick is sort of a 50% chance to get a solid player. So why is Oweh only going for a fifth round pick? Because it's also important to understand that these GMs, they view these players, these draft picks, as not just a percent chance to get a good player, but the fact that he's going to be cheap on a rookie deal. So it's not just the chance you can get a good player. So if you look at a first round pick, 50% chance, you could view a first round pick as 50% of a good player or 0.5 of a good player, but you also get him for 4 years on a cheap rookie deal. So let's go into our next graphic here. And I know I'm throwing a lot of numbers at you guys here, but I promise I'm going to get to the meat here in a second. So GMs will look at a first round pick as basically having 2 solid player years, right? A 50% chance of being a solid player. So 0.5 for 4 years, that's 2, 0.5 times 4, that's 2. You can go down the list, second round pick, third round pick, fourth round pick, and there you get to fifth round pick. And I think this is where the real value jumps into play here. What the Chargers essentially gave away, I know Gilman as well, but look, I think the Ravens need some safety help. They need some defensive back depth. I think that was one of those moves that the fifth round pick was the real reason, and Gilman just gives the Ravens somebody they can play on defense. If I'm being honest, that's how I'm reading the trade. But the fifth round pick, that's the real value here. That's the real kicker because draft capital is really treated like gold. But a fifth round pick in terms of player years from a solid player perspective is less than 0.2, guys. It's right around 0.2, 0.25 when it's all said and done, right? So we're talking about right here for player years, a score of 0.25. Odafe Oweh is a solid player. We know he's a good player, right? Is he an all-pro? Is he a Hall of Famer? No, but he's a good, solid player. So he's worth one good player year. The Chargers traded away a fifth round pick that's worth 0.25 good player years. Look at that value. One is greater than 0.25. In fact, it's 4 times greater than 0.25. And basically, I'm throwing all these numbers out here to help you guys understand how big of a train robbery this was for the Chargers. Now, from the Ravens' perspective, you can see why they did it as well, right? They need to get some assets. They need to have people that can play, that are healthy in their defensive backfield. So you can see why the Ravens are doing this trade. But from the Chargers' perspective, this is highway robbery to the extreme. Smart franchises take advantage of opportunities when they're present. Joe Ortiz did a great job here. Odafe Oweh, we know, is a good, solid player. The numbers bear it out. The grades bear it out. Everyone evaluating the defensive end knows he's a good, solid player. Double-digit sacks already one season in his career. So he's a good player. And the Chargers essentially trade him away with a solid special teams guy, a safety in Gilman, who's a decent guy, good locker room guy, nothing special, but a decent guy, plus a guy who's plus a fifth-round pick that's worth, again, about a quarter of a solid player. So who won the trade? I'll tell you who won the trade. The team that got one good solid player for the cost of a quarter of one. It's just math, guys. It's just simple analysis here. It's nothing earth-shattering. You don't have to get the abacus out. You don't have to get the TI-89 calculator out. You can do simple arithmetic and understand that the Chargers here pulled off a masterclass of a trade. It's even better than people think. People are giving it A+ reviews, but I tell you what, when you break down the number, it looks even better than that. All right, Miles, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. Lord knows I've had enough numbers thrown at everybody right now. I'm sure people are probably tired of me with my graphs at this point. But first, Chargers fans in the comment section below, want to hear from you guys. How would you grade this trade? Do you feel like I do, where it was just A++, they crushed it? Or do you have little reservations? You think maybe it's just a B trade or whatever it may be? Maybe you don't like it. Maybe you think it's a C trade, D trade. For whatever reason, grade this trade for us in the comment section below. Want to hear from you guys. But Miles, let me throw it over to you now. What are your thoughts on this trade and everything going on with the Chargers?
Yeah, Nick, I think this is a great trade for the Chargers. Just like you said, value wise, if you go by the numbers, obviously it was a win for the Chargers. Like you said, the Ravens a little bit desperation mode, so they're able to go out and give up a little bit more than they probably should to get somebody who can play now, and then throw in, like you said, a little sweetener on the side to help them in their future endeavors as well. But the Chargers definitely got the better end of this deal. I don't think there's any way around that. But I think it's more than that, and it's a little bit deeper than that as to how good this could be for the Chargers. I think Joe Ortiz is a guy that knows exactly about what I'm going to talk about, because it is a little inside baseball as for Baltimore Ravens. I think it's kind of how they run their defense versus how other teams run guys off the edge. And it just shows the Ravens players, while they're on the Ravens, at least the last 10 years or so, they really haven't done their best work in Baltimore. But when these guys leave to go to other teams, and there's a couple notable names on here, they go on and really explode onto the scene and kind of have their best year yet with the said team they left for. A couple names to run by, and I'll go by the most recent to the oldest, is most recently Matthew Judon, a guy that was with the Baltimore Ravens for a long time, got 34 and a half sacks with Baltimore, goes to New England, instantly gets a career high 15 and a half sacks that next season. So it's kind of the way that the Ravens run the defense. The sacks are kind of evenly distributed. They don't really, siphon them out to one guy or another. Another one, Zadarius Smith, a guy was at Baltimore, did a lot of great work, goes over to the Green Bay Packers, has a breakout season the very next season, 13 and a half sacks there as well. Another guy, getting a little bit older now, but Paul Kruger, a guy who was with Baltimore for a while, over the edge, gets traded to the Cleveland Browns, where he has his career best 11 sacks that season. Then another guy on the edge, Pernell McPhee, kind of a rotational piece. Then he goes over to the Bears and has a pretty good season with them as well, just showing that he was a solid player rather than a rotational piece. So it seems that a lot of guys go over to these other teams. So I think there's propensity for the Chargers to have gotten somebody who could be A+ player or go above expectation on some of this stuff, just because of the kind of defense the Ravens have been running. I think we're going to see him explode on the scene. Always very athletic guy. We saw him coming out of Penn State, what he's able to do. I think there's some upside potential for this trade, so it could be even better than people are saying. We've seen it happen in the past a good many times here recently, but I think this could be the next one, the next big Ravens pass rusher to go to another team, get some star level treatment on the edge, and potentially explode on the scene. This could be a really big time trade for the Chargers.
And I just want to go ahead and address one thing that I think people may come out and say, and they may say, well, Gilman's a solid player, right? He started for the Chargers. And I don't disagree with the fact that he started and played, but if you actually look at the grades and you look at the PFF grades, he actually, if you look at the top three safeties, Jefferson, James, and then Gilman, in terms of who was the better player according to coverage grade, Gilman was the worst of the three. So again, I'm not saying he's a bad football player, but I think you have to understand, looking at the Chargers defense and how they're structured, they basically have created an environment. It worked its way through the preseason too, where they could basically plug not anybody back there, but they had so much depth. They drafted and developed well. It's a very DB friendly scheme in a lot of ways, where what we saw from production from Gilman here, the first 5 or so games of the season, wasn't really how good he is outside of the Charger system. And that's an important thing to keep in mind when you talk about a trade. One of the things you want to do, you want to trade away guys that are system dependent on you and bring in guys that are system, they don't have to rely on any specific system. Always one of those guys, like you mentioned, he's a great athlete, physical specimen. You look at a guy like Gilman, has to play in some certain schemes, right? He's at his best in mentor scheme. And it wasn't like he was terrible, but it wasn't like he was elite either. So it's important to understand that concept. I honestly believe Gilman going to this Ravens defense will take a step off. I think Oweh, like you alluded to, he could step up. So there could be even compounding effects of value here. And that's really important to consider, because a lot of people will say, well, you're just trading starter for starter and throwing a 5th-round kicker in. I don't think so. I think Gilman's the guy who, outside of the Chargers defense in that scheme, he's a solid backup. I think Oweh's a starter for 90% of teams in the National Football League. That's the difference, and that's where that 5th-round value, that 5x multiple of Oweh's value versus what that 5th-round pick provides, that's where that comes into play. So this is a really solid move by the Chargers. Again, it's getting a lot of plaudits in the media, but when you dive deeper into the data, it gets even better and better. Great job by Ortiz, great by Harbaugh. The Chargers defense got a massive upgrade at a position of need.